It's such a great pleasure to be here. Actually, I'm positively surprised that we start so quickly because I thought that the introductory speeches would be longer. But I already have a main takeaway from this conference that we have a high-level politician in Berlin that actually takes the word blockchain in her mouth and actually with a positive connotation. That is not what I hear in Brussels, where they all avoid talking about blockchain, but start many new projects that actually require blockchain to work. So in that sense, Berlin has already provided me with a positive surprise, and very happy then to elaborate on this. So, sorry? I need to, now it works. I think I have about 20 minutes and hope to stick about that, or should I be shorter? No, perfect. I see many friends, many experts I know, so that's already very good here in the room. And I apologize that some of you will have seen one or two of these slides, but not everyone. Not everything has been said yet by everyone. So I start with some anecdotal evidence, but my main topic is actually the societal role of blockchain throughout time. Because time is of essence, we celebrate 10 years of the HTW Blockchain Conference in Berlin. 10 years is an eternity on blockchain and crypto, with so many things happening. But 10 years is nothing in human history, and I try to find a bridge between what humans have always done, which is very close to actually what we do on blockchain and tokenization, and at the other hand, what happens in the blockchain space. What you see here is a token. This is basically a payment and value creation and preservation service. You know all of that. It's the famous stone money on certain islands in the Pacific. What you see in the middle, these millstones are tokens. They stand for value. So if you're the owner of such a token, you have a certain value in your hands for which you can exchange goods. And the value exchange happens in the form that the community comes together, and then the transfer of value is openly discussed and agreed upon, and then the next one owns the millstone and you get something for that. And you can even be the owner of a millstone that has been swept away by the flood, because the community will remember that this is the case, and we have these historic examples for this, that you can say, I want to buy this and that with the millstone that has disappeared in the flood of 1879, and it works. What I show with this example is that basically what we're discussing on blockchain, crypto, and tokenization, conceptually nothing is new, but we have to translate this between the languages of the traditional old language and the new language, which is very much also an academic exercise. That is the wrong direction, so because I'm holding this in the wrong way. Perfect. So indeed, we see that tokens are very, very old. Ledgers are very old. They've always existed on paper. And the concept, basically, if you want to explain to someone what is a blockchain, is not more that should take you 30 seconds, because it's a quite straightforward thing of listing transactions, timestamping them, and then distributing them in the way that you disseminate the knowledge and that the integrity of the information is preserved. My main activity at the moment in my function, because we had a reorganization, so we're not digital transformation of industry anymore, but I'm now working in a unit that is called responsible business conduct, whatever is meant by this, where my role is to develop especially more legal certainty for innovative business models. That includes also DAOs. DAOs are digital cooperatives. DAOs are basically a digital form of offline cooperatives that have also always existed. In Europe alone, we have at the moment 250,000 cooperatives in the various countries of the Union. We also have a European-wide scheme, but we only have a bit more than 100 use cases in this. We might at the moment have, I don't know, perhaps 500,000 DAOs, we don't know. There is a web page that lists DAOs that has 50,000, but of course DAOs don't tend to register and be mentioned on web pages, so I think the number is of course much higher. And this shows that there's a direct link between what people have basically always done. They have found themselves in communities that define jointly what the value is, and then they find a way of creating and transferring that value in the form of tokens, as we have seen. And this is basically what we're talking about in the crypto space. So conceptually, nothing new indeed, but with a much higher speed of innovation, and especially when you see the linkages now with artificial intelligence, with aspects of cybersecurity, quantum computing, and everything that is going on. Now, all of this is relevant, but at the same time, we know that in politics, this whole idea of mutual ownership, of decision-making, of cooperatives is not a topic that we see every day in the news. Actually, I spoke 2 days ago at the Economic and Social Committee in Brussels, where they present now a paper on the role of cooperatives, especially in industry. And the key feature of this topic is basically that it doesn't interest anyone outside those bubbles that talk about that. Indeed, many cooperatives in the real world, offline, tell me that they are not very much liked by governments, that they are in many countries discriminated against, that bureaucracy is very high, and that they face a struggle in getting access to finance, getting access to resources, etc. So to get out of this, what it usually takes in politics when you want to put something on the agenda is a sort of crisis, is a major crisis. And we all know, and also this here is very old basically, that for blockchain, this was when the starting point was with the Bitcoin white paper 6 weeks after the collapse of Lehman Brothers. So during the financial crisis 2008, the same moment, the crisis point of centralized systems that didn't work because of the interrelated risks, and then the emergence of decentralization. And this for us put blockchain politically on the list because we had to save all these banks and we were looking for alternatives, and blockchain and crypto are offering alternatives. That has taken time, and you all have followed this journey. When I go 10 years ago, when you started with the first conference here, that was about the time when the European Commission decided that we see blockchain as an innovation priority for all policy fields. So the moment that you started your work, we had just basically declared that this work is indeed of essential importance to all of us, and that we want to be very proactively supportive for that. And since then, I think many things have happened. But what took us until 10 years ago was that after the financial crisis, we had to spend 4, 5, 6 years only to stabilize again the centralized system with the banks and the capital markets that had been there before. And this took a lot of energy, and in a way, it prevented an even earlier start. But I must say, the speed with which not only the European decision makers, but also you in your work and everyone that is sitting here in your activities have actually understood and adopted the importance of that technology is unprecedented. And that is something I think for which we can congratulate ourselves today, because whatever happened since then has proven that we are on the right track. And now even we see that this translates also in a change of the regulatory system, the meta politics behind that, because as we know, especially when you deal with things like finance and the MiCA regulation and other things, the traditional regulatory system is getting more and more dysfunctional. And this slide summarizes, and that's also for many of you not new, how I see the difference between the traditional world, let's say pre-Lehman Brothers, and how I see it now with sort of emergence of crowdfunding, crypto assets, tokenization, etc., where we have a completely different form of governance, where we replace the time that we can afford for building policy and regulation for mature markets, for people on markets, companies that we know very well, for services that are only changed very slowly and in very incremental amount by much more disruptive innovation, by the emergence of new markets and by highly innovative combinations of different products and services. And this requires, on the one hand side, a proactive approach, but also a much better alignment with industry, with companies, with everyone who actually builds technology and who applies technology. And the thing that I will explain later on, and I'll spend some minutes on examples, is how we do that in practice, to see that indeed we do not only talk about these things, and one can talk very long about this, but that we're actually building. We are still building too little, but we're actually building massively, and not very much of this is actually seen publicly, so it's a good moment to take stock. Interestingly enough, or difficult enough for decision makers, this can go in either direction. This is something that I saw last year when I went to a conference in Switzerland, and I found it a very interesting metaphor for me. There is a place in Switzerland near St. Moritz where actually they have a little place where there is a plate with 3 holes. And if you put a drop of water on this plate, it finds its ways in either of the 3 holes. And depending on which hole the water chooses, it ends up in the North Sea, in the Black Sea, or in the Mediterranean. Because the waterways, the rivers, go in these directions. Now, this is actually something how I see very much the reality, especially in the societal and political dimensions that we are discussing, because we think we have all the elements. We think that we have the understanding, we have technology, we have use cases. We might convince certain people. But my experience, and I don't know about your experience, is that you can combine very similar things and you can end up in totally different directions. And that depends on what the mindset is. And if you're looking for a recent example, I would say, look at what is happening in the United States. And I'm not commenting on this. But what has the Trump government changed in terms of written regulation since they came into power? It is basically zero. But it is the application, the interpretation of written rules, the way how, for example, authorities approach certain items that can change tremendously the outcome. And I'm not saying what is better or worse, but it's highly interesting to see that we spend also in Europe endless time, especially by bureaucrats, interpreting the most minuscule rules and adding tons of level 2 standards on certain forms of regulation, but we are not really busy with just helping the market get along. And this is something where I see a massive problem, because this is a sort of overkill of, again, a top-down approach where you can have the same technology, blockchain, and you can either be very pro-innovative and help the market and citizens to be not only efficient, but also compliant with data protection and privacy rules. But you can use the same technology, take things like the travel rules and others, where you exercise complete and excessive control using just the same combination of things. So it's about the mindset. It is not primarily about technology, it is a question of mindset. This is a quite famous, although it's already now also 2-year-old, exercise that the Wharton School did, because we take our timeline a little bit further. We started with ancient history with the stones. We came to the 2008 financial crisis. And then we come to the question, what might the world look like in 10 years, in 2035? And this is a projection from the Wharton School on what we are discussing here. We have no idea what happens with this other thing, why it is black. It shouldn't be black. But this is basically 2 dimensions, centralized and decentralized. So certain things have apparently disappeared since I produced the slides. What is on top is basically if you have unified systems or if you have distinct systems. And how you combine centralized and decentralized technology application with unified systems so that you have a sort of global system, or distinct systems so that everyone does what they want, brings you in these 4 different paradigms, which all, if I look at them, look for me in different ways pretty dystopic. I tend to argue with myself regarding the 2 lower ones on decentralization, which I like a little bit more than the other. But the upper 2 on centralization are certainly not highly attractive worlds that we might live in. And this is where, not really saying that this is necessarily my opinion, but how certain experts see how we might end up in 10 years, where basically, again, if technology is used in the wrong way by the wrong people, you can get pretty dystopic outcomes in terms of societal control, in terms of restrictions of liberty, and in terms of channeling the innovation in a way of wrong direction. Now, I run very quickly because I don't want to stretch time into what we have been doing. We have been working a lot since we made this statement, which I display here 10 years ago, how we want to start on a European innovation mission together with you, with everyone interested and active in this space, on how we can actually fill distributed ledger technology with life in practice. So this was a statement we made 10 years ago, that we actually bet on the positive and for the society useful effects of this technology, and that we want to do this in a way where we do it together. And I give you 4 examples very briefly. And don't look too much on the slides. I know pedagogically this is awful, but these slides are only for visualization of how much actually has been happening in these 10 years. So this is a slide that shows our European blockchain service infrastructure, EPSI, which we have built open source, and on which we dock a lot of different processes where we apply what we call proof of authenticity in order to onboard everyone who is working in these blockchain systems, and in what different parts of society we do that. And we have by now on this system built at least 25 major use cases. The most important, in my opinion, is the, I would say, thing that is taking forward the digital product passport, which is a system to detect fake products, the anti-counterfeiting blockchain infrastructure, where we basically give every physical item an identity throughout the whole distribution chain from production to the end consumer, and we can guarantee using NFTs and digital twins the authenticity of the product so that it's not a fake product. This is operational. We tested it in the Netherlands, it's fully operational. We have a lot of other examples, be that in education, finance, other areas, where we use the same concept, for example, for universities to certify diplomas, or for companies that send workers abroad only for a couple of months to be sure that the social security certification is correct and that they don't need to run through the bureaucratic process. All of this is at a relatively early stage, but 25 major projects in less than 10 years built on an infrastructure that, by the way, is now heavily threatened because of financial issues, but that is another discussion, and not perhaps in a day where we want to celebrate, but it's far from sure that we can continue in this form as we want. This is a hackathon that we did a couple of years ago, where we worked together with 150 experts from industry to develop prototypical blockchain applications for different parts of industrial value chains, starting from sourcing of inputs to energy, to distribution, production, surveillance, etc. And for each of the 9 colored use cases here, we built one prototypical blockchain application that at the time looked pretty much science fiction, like drone-based supply of medical products if there is an accident or if there's an urgent transplant or whatever, to ensure the integrity of the medical item. And this now is operational in Canada, this is operational in a number of countries, etc. It shows that blockchain works. And it is very quickly that actually these use cases are developing. This is a project where we are bringing together, which is much underestimated in reality, the financial world and the real world, the industry. This is a group of about 25 major companies in Europe, many of them German, that come either from the financial sector or from industry, that work together on their concept of what tokenization in practice might look like. And I know all the shortcomings that we still have in practice. I know all the very detailed practical issues that we need to develop over many more years, unfortunately. But this form of dialogue between the supply side and the demand side to really get a common language to work on interoperability, to show that use cases actually exist and can be leveraged, is for us a very important part of the work that we do. And of course, our sandbox, where basically now we are starting the 3rd year of our European blockchain regulatory sandbox with 20 new use cases, 3 of which will be DAOs. And for the first time also in the new cohort, which starts next month, we have use cases that cross the border with AI and other technologies to tell the about 50 different national regulators that are there of what they should look to in the future when it comes to a very steep learning curve that they're actually getting there. This sandbox heavily exceeds my expectations, I must say. I was in the last cohort involved in 1 use case. The next cohort I will be involved in 6 use cases. I don't know how I will do that in terms of time management. My time management is awful anyway. But this is so interesting that actually it's a highly fascinating place if you've ever been in a sandbox to see that you can basically ask any type of question. And this is also a privilege that actually I have, both in talking to universities, but also with industry and the financial sector. Many of you here in the room represent these, and this is also a moment for me to express gratitude, because I have the privilege as someone who advises policymakers and regulators to be able to call a lot of highly intelligent people to just explain to me the most stupid things that I never understand. And this is really the dialogue that we also need to develop much further. So thank you very much from my side. I conclude, is all of this really complicated? No. This is a slide that I regularly use when I want to explain beyond this little stone at the beginning of what we're talking about. This is a container, this is a token actually. So the physical container like this, and we have friends from Liechtenstein here, is basically what you have already seen a number of years ago when you developed your token law, because you designed the token container model, where actually this little picture has all the characteristics that we expect from a token. It is standardized. It has a form that in the physical form can be used for lorries, for trains, for ships. In the virtual world, it can be between different blockchain systems, and something is in there or not. We can't see from the outside what is in there. We hope that something useful is in there. It can be a physical thing. It can be something with money or other items like this. It can, in the digital world, be intellectual property. It can be nothing. We don't know. And that is all there is to know basically about a token, unless, of course, you have to program it. The same here, a slide that is recognizable to some of you here, which I tend to use from a project from DZ Bank and Evonik, to also explain that when we talk about the monetary aspects of tokenization, not much is new either. We take the existing forms of money that are there, and blockchain just puts an additional layer of functionality and efficiency to all the existing systems if I take out the right part, which is only through the DLT. So there again, if we try to talk to politicians, if we educate students, if we work among ourselves, we need to conceptualize in easily understandable language and visualization, because otherwise, unfortunately, don't think we will really get much forward. At the end of the day, this is not about economics, this is not about law, this is about practical application, which I think also HTW is an excellent place to carry out this work, because we should not overly theorize. This is code, zeros and ones that have a certain function, that have a certain content, and this is the type of language that we actually need to see. I conclude, half a minute more, because this is a topic that I'm now very busy with, and I would like to bring it to your attention. The biggest challenge that we see now is that blockchain is so transparent that it has attracted a lot of interest, especially from certain actors in the state, to be used as a control instrument. And blockchain, in my opinion, can only work if at the same time it fully ensures privacy and protects data. This is why privacy-enhancing technologies are of utmost importance, and this is massively challenged, including the statement recently by Europol that they consider zero-knowledge proofs as something which is basically a tool for criminals. We use that massively ourselves, but this is unfortunately also a certain division in the public sector which is regrettable. And we have drafted a little document which we call the Digital Freedom Declaration, where we emphasize the relevance of these types of technologies. This is not commission work. This is what a little group of people with a certain contribution also from myself have done. There are a number of people in this room that have signed it. I'm very grateful for you to this. But this shows us that we have seen undoubtedly the enormous societal relevance of blockchain, crypto, and tokenization for all times. But there will always be challenges, and at the moment this is one of the biggest ones, so a lot of work still to be done. But if we want life to be easy, we should retire or be dead or something like that. I think it's nice to have an interesting life. It's nice to have an interesting conference ahead of us, so thank you very much for setting up this program, and thank you very much for your attention for this little presentation.